Welcome to Healing Your Family Legacy, here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. Innovative, evidence-based recovery that helps to identify intergenerational trauma, allowing for freedom and embracement of the healing process. Today, episode 89, The Expectation for Perfection, Part 2. And now your host, Dr. Donna Bevan-Lee.
This is Dr. Donna Bevan-Lee, helping you heal your family legacy. Well, last time I kind of did a little challenge there. I don't know if everybody got it. At the end where I said, try and be a 5. Okay. And I wonder if anybody tried to be a 5, not just said, oh, well, I'm a 5, but really looked around and said, what am I trying to be perfect at? And then dialed it back to be a 5. Okay. So, I could tell you that, one of the ways that I comforted myself as a child, and I still do as an adult, is I go to nature. Okay. I climb mountains and I go on long hikes. I climbed a mountain over here in Oregon just day before yesterday. No, I guess it was Sunday. Time gets away from me a little bit that way. So on Sunday, I went on this climb that ended up being almost 15 miles. And it was pretty much straight up. I mean, that was a big, big climb. And, as I was approaching the top, I noticed that I feel a little unsteady now. And I've never felt that way. And so, I got it's like there were a couple of other people coming up behind me, and they were college kids because we had a little chat. And I've gotten this shame attack. I thought, what am I doing? Oh, they're going to notice that, when I put one foot out, I kind of lean back a little bit and have to go, oh, and now my poles get dug in and I get my balance back. Now we're talking, this is pretty much straight up. It's not technical, okay? So you'll never see ropes there and all that, but it's pretty much straight up. So it's not like I was on flat ground losing my balance. And I did. I went right into shower. I should do this. What am I doing up here? I shouldn't be up here. What's wrong with me? What am I thinking? And I hope they didn't notice that. And if they did, I was like, shame on me. And I had that for about, 15 seconds or something. And then I just went, oh, God, how many 72-year-old people are here anyway? There aren't many. And so as I got to the top, I had a little conversation, a little chat with these college kids from Eugene, and they said, wow, this is great up here, you can see forever. I said, yeah, it is. And there was a beautiful little glacial lake right there, and it was just stunning. And one of them said to me, do you come up here a lot? And I said, yeah, this is I come up here many times. But I called myself out and I said, but today I felt a little unstable. And, it's like they didn't even get what I was talking about. So I was having that shame attack all about me and my expectations that I've been doing this all my life and I should be able to continue to do it and blah, blah, blah. And I thought, as I sat there and, drank my water and had a little snack, and I thought, I don't need to be a 10 here. I don't need to be perfect. I don't, on a scale of 0 to 10, I'm probably a 6 or 7, and that's pretty good. And I've been a 5 before. I've been a 5 on a mountain before where I've gotten to a certain level, and this happened, here too. And that was, the wind was so extreme that I had fear that it might blow me off the mountain, and that would be bad. Now, whether that was realistic or not, it certainly felt realistic to me, because every time I stood up, I started my literal body was moving to a place I wasn't, wanting to go. And so, I took care of that by not standing up and got really low to the ground until those winds eased up a little bit. But, it's like I couldn't go to the top. I had to turn around and go back. That doesn't mean I was a failure. It doesn't mean that I was, I was being, it looked like a 5. It looked like I might say I was a 5 or even a 3, or maybe a complete and total failure because I didn't get to the top. But it didn't take me long to recognize that that's unrealistic today. And there was, I passed a couple of people on my way down that I could tell were determined to make it to the top, even with those winds. And I said to myself, I don't have to do this perfect. I don't, because perfect in my world would have been making it to the top and sitting there and looking around and having a snack and drink of water. And that wasn't going to happen. In a way, I was, and you can see this is all about reality, right? A person's reality. And in my reality, it was a good idea to get close to the ground so I wouldn't get blown off the mountain and make my way down. And yes, people do get blown off mountains, by the way. Winds on mountains, especially above tree line, can get really, really extreme. So, you really can be blown off a mountain. I've read many articles about people being blown off mountains. But back to what I was talking about was that, I was aware the other day of that little, still what I call shame attack. I'm not good enough. I wish people didn't see me. I hope they didn't see me, almost fall backwards. I wish, that is a shame attack. And it's always about childhood trauma. And mine was, if I'm not perfect, I'm not good enough. I grew up Mormon. And that is one of the expectations, is that you are trying to achieve perfection in your life. And guess what? It isn't possible. Why? Because we're human. And so learning how to celebrate the 5s, learning how to celebrate the 3s. It's like if I come home as a child or, a teenager or something, if I come home with a B on my report card, it doesn't mean that I'm a failure. It means that I'm a human being. If I can celebrate a B, it looks like this. Okay, so this isn't going to be on a scale of 0 to 10, a 10 day for me. It's going to be, say, a 7 day for me. Or if I'm trying to get into Princeton, it might be a feeling of total and utter failure because I think that Princeton's not going to want me at their school. But if the reaction I have of feeling like a complete and total failure means that I don't apply and I don't, work a little harder to get an A if that's what I want, it's not a reflection on who I am as a human being. It's not a reflection on who I am as a human being. Now, if you remember last time I talked about all of these ego states live inside of us, okay? So when I felt like a complete and failure and hoped that no one saw me, I was at I was in my wounded child ego state, okay? So I was feeling really young and really vulnerable in that moment. I was able to get myself grown up and say, well, I've just got a few more feet here and then I'm going to be at the top, which is where I want to be. And, so I was able to get there. But I would not have been able to get there if I hadn't grown myself up first. Now, if you remember the primary ego states I talked about, one was the wounded child ego state, And one was the adapted adult child ego state, where you're just saying, well, Duke's up. I am going to, I don't like this. You people aren't okay by me. You're worthless. And so I'm not having really anything to do with you, or I'm going to fight you, or I'm going to kill you. Kind of like when I talked about those incels that, they go shooting people. They try and kill people that they think are, that they are being avoided by. And it's like, who wants to be in a relationship with someone who has that reality? I don't know. It wouldn't be very fun. But I'm talking about growing up. That's what all this has been about. It's like, so what? It would be I would be so happy, and I'd feel much safer in the world if, say, people who had access to nuclear weapons all acted like a grown-up when they're thinking about it. It's like, if we're not going to use them, what if grown-ups look around and they're in their adult reality, right? They are their age. Say they're 60 and they are acting like 60-year-olds. And they're thinking like 60-year-olds. They say, we've got all these things here that we have all decided we're not going to use these. Let's rid ourselves of them. We don't do that. We're still in the place where, the leaders of our country still have their dukes up and say, don't mess with me, because if you do, I'll mess with you. Now, it's not just the leaders. There are people who aren't the leaders of the country that are also doing this. I live in Central Oregon, and I'm older and I'm small, and, bullies, usually, I gotta tell you, they're usually in these great big pickup trucks with enormous wheels and flags sticking out, and they'll run me over rather than stop for me. Not only that, but they'll do it with this kind of Cheshire cat smile on their face. What is up with that? I shudder to think that there are, 13-year-old angry 13-year-olds driving. Because that's what they are. They're angry 13-year-olds in grown-up bodies, and that is very dangerous. But that comes from an expectation where either I am extraordinarily special and you are not useful. You aren't special, so you're not useful. So I need to get you off this planet, or I am such a big piece of crap that I have to go around and show everyone how special I am in order to feel like I've finally achieved perfection. Okay? Who knows which side that is? They're both extreme. But if you struggle with feeling like a 3 or even a 2, sometimes I feel like I'm, clapping for myself that I woke up. Because, I've had something happen, or, that happens to people, like when they have the flu or they have COVID and they wake up, and it's like, that is a day to celebrate. That's a 1. But we're celebrating that 1. I will never climb the biggest mountains in the world. I did climb Kilimanjaro once, and that's pretty big, but that's not one of the biggest mountains in the world. I'll never be going up Everest or K2 or, those kind of mountains. I'll never do it. Does it mean that I am a complete failure to go up mountains? No. I celebrate that I'm about a 5. I mean, that's what my experience is that I'm a 5. I've always been a 5. I'll always be a 5. Some things I do really well. Some days I feel like I'm on top of the world. And those, it's like I know, okay, I know that when I feel like I'm in a 10, that don't worry, you'll feel a 5 again soon enough. I'll be there and it'll be fun for a while, but those don't last. And so then if I feel like today is a 5, then I can embrace it. I can say, well, I didn't go on the biggest hike or the most exciting hike. Maybe I just walked around my neighborhood for, an hour. That's a 5. And I came back and I felt fine. And I looked at my neighbors and I looked at my neighbors' houses and yards and, noticed deer wandering around and, things like that. And it's like, I felt good and I felt like that was a celebration. But that's not something you write home about. And, the people in my world, I'm, sorry, if you're listening to this and you're in my world, trust me when I say that, you're all between about 3 and 7 most of the time. It doesn't mean you're failures, and I'm not trying to put you down because like I said, I'm a 5. I'm a good 5. I celebrate that. Sometimes a little bit like a 3 or a 2 or even a 1. And sometimes a 6 or 7, 8, 9 or 10. And that's fine. But I'm a 5 and I celebrate that every day. I'll tell you what that does. It takes the pressure off. It takes the pressure off to be perfect. It's like, I don't have to be perfect. I don't try to be perfect. I'm not a perfect driver. I'm a good driver. I don't get in wrecks. Knocking on wood now. I don't hit people. Knocking on wood now. I'm a good driver. I'm right up there with the best of them with, how strong my legs are and, where I can go with those legs and these lungs. And that's great. But, and I like golf, but I am not good at golf. I'm a laughing stock. And sometimes the golf marshal would come along and say, you need to move it along. Well, I'm on my 10th try and get this ball out of here. Not good at golf. I like it. Live on a golf course, crying out loud. Didn't plan that. That wasn't my ideal. And, the idea, I've never felt, because of the way I grew up, that there was something extraordinarily special about me, except for the fact that I grew up Mormon, and all Mormon children are trained to think that we really are special because we have, what I believed and because what I was told, the truth. That made us special. And as I grew up and I looked at what's really going on, I thought, religions are religions. My belief about that is that people get drawn to a religion for many reasons. And nobody's more special than anyone else. We're all just trying to get along. We're all just trying to live our lives. And if we stop to focus on, I've got to be more special than you, or in order to be acceptable, I need to be more special than you. So I'll keep doing more and more and more and trying many, many different ways to be better than you. Or I think I'm just better than you. Either one of those two things will keep us in crisis in this world. Imagine, and I've said this before, but the idea, if you really think about the fact that we're all probably 5s, pretty much 5s. If we all recognized that and saw that we were 5s, then, we wouldn't have to, we would probably take better care of our world. We wouldn't be looking at nuclear threats, because if I say we're all fives, I'm talking about we're all fives, not just, it's like, that means that Biden's a five and Putin's a five, and, all of our Congress people are fives, and mayors are fives, and governors are fives. And if everybody recognized that, nobody would be feeling like they were dispensable. Okay? It's a bad feeling to feel like people might feel like they're just way more special than me, and that makes me dispensable. That's not something you want to go to sleep with at night. And, I actually had that guy I talked about with the big truck and the flags. He actually took aim at me one day when I was trying to cross the street in the crosswalk. Man, he came flying out of a parking lot of a store to go left where I was standing in a crosswalk with the light. And the look on his face was one of pure, unadulterated rage and hatred. He tried to hit me with his car, his truck. And fortunately for me, I jumped out of the way. It scared me half to death. And I don't know what was causing him to hate me so bad in the morning, or in that morning. My suspicion was that he looked at me and realized that, I wasn't, it's like I was female, older. At that time, I wasn't the same age I am now. Probably I was about 60. And, the story I made up, we all make up stories, but the story made up about him was that he was probably incel-like and viewed me as, a dispensable woman because I wouldn't be useful for him anymore. And I was just one of those not useful women to him. Or maybe he thought I was dispensable because I was aging. Or maybe he thought I was dispensable because I was gay. I don't pretend. Okay, I don't try and pass as straight. I'm gay. I've always been gay. I've always, I've known it since I was 21. And, it's not like I walk around in rainbow colors, but most of the time, if you're paying attention, you'd know. So maybe that's why. But this is the kind of danger that, when you can't appreciate fives, people who are fives, that means you too, me too. It's like if you can't celebrate that and appreciate that, there's always going to be someone that you think is better than you, that you want to take down. Because, if you're trying to get, to that perfection and these other people are in the way because they, it's like you might think that they're better than you, then that's not a good place to be. Or you just think that they're taking up your air and that you've got to get them out of there because that's your air, your oxygen, your space. We got to get those people out of there so that we can achieve our our greatness. That's not real. It isn't real. So I'm almost out, but I have to tell you this funny story, okay, that relates to this. So when I was in my late 20s, so we're talking about 50 years ago, over 50 years ago. This is a story I tell my friends and they just laugh and laugh and laugh. They think it's so funny. I was running a mental health clinic. Now I was like 29 or something, 28, something like that. And I was running a mental health clinic off the I-80, Interstate 80, out, east of Reno in this it was a little podunk town then. It's a lot bigger now. And I was running a mental health clinic there, a one-person mental health clinic. That person was me. But it was a nice space, right? It was in the middle of town, and it was part of the state mental health system. So I wasn't in private practice. And one day I was leaving my office. Now, I had been sober for about 1.5 years, and I was just like still trying to figure out this God thing and all this. So I was like, that was my personal life. But in my my daily life, I've always been a pretty good therapist and a good worker. And, I grew up with that, work ethic. But I was leaving my office, and this group of what I thought were Hare Krishnas, all right? They had all orange gowns on, all that. If any of you don't know what they are, it's like they look like Buddhist monks, okay? Hare Krishnas. So they came walking up to me. There was about 7 or 8. And said, this woman said to me, we've got, this is the Dalai Lama, and he is walking across the United States to make people aware of the situation in Tibet where he's been exiled from, and to let people know about this so that maybe they can, give him some support so he can go home someday. Now, I had been born and raised Mormon. I did not know any of this, okay? And I spent a lot of years being drunk after that. So, I looked at them and I said, and what do you want from me? Well, she says, we would like for you to let us stay in your space. Now, I had some windows there and they could see inside. The waiting area was huge. I don't know why. There was only one of me. But the waiting area was really quite huge. And I said, you want to stay in my office here? Oh, yes. I said, so I work for the state, and I don't think my bosses would appreciate me having a bunch of people in my office at night sleeping while I'm not here. And I'm not going to be here because, every day, I'm training for a marathon, blah, blah, blah. I went off, talking about me. And she said, well, we would absolutely take good care of your space. We would not hurt it in any way. And it would really help us because, this is vital. This is important. This is a whole country. And I thought, well, that's hyperbole. Can't say that word. But anyway, that was over the top. But I was kind of in a rush to start my run. And so I said, well, look, if you would like to stay in because I had client records in there too, by the way. They're private. I locked I lock them up every night in the file cabinet. And so I said, look, if you want to stay in this office, you must stay in this part of the office area that has, linoleum floors, not the carpet. Because if you get anything on the carpet, I'm in trouble. If you stay on this part where the linoleum floors are, there's a bathroom right there. And she said, well, I'll tell you what, we get up early, we'll cook our rice, we'll be on our way, we'll take really good care. And I thought, okay, whatever, I've got to get out of here, I've got to run. So I said, okay, we're good. I'll be here at 7:00. You better be ready to leave or be gone because, you can't be gone because you can't leave till I come back and unlock the door because it locks from both sides. So she said, oh, thank you. And next day I come in, there they are sitting around waiting for me to get there to unlock the door. So I unlock it. And they all said, oh, thank you so much. They were so grateful. Take my hand, said, thank you. And then the Dalai Lama came and he bowed and he said, thank you so much. Here, I'd like to give you a book. And I said, thank you very much. And please leave now. Because if somebody sees you here, I'll be in trouble. And they all left, and they're all saying, thank you so much. And, they got back on the interstate and started walking. And I thought, wow, God, that was a close call. I could have been in so much trouble and blah, blah, blah. It wasn't until about, let's see, that would have been around 1979, 1980, maybe 81. Anyway, so it wasn't until several years later that it kind of all dropped into place. And I was significantly, I had my child by then. It was probably about 20 years later, maybe, that one of my friends who had started to study Buddhism, she said to me, I really like this. And, I really like what the Dalai Lama said. And I was like, I knew who the Dalai Lama was by then. But I went, wait a minute. I have a book that the Dalai Lama gave me. And she goes, oh my God. You go, what? I said, well, I have this book the Dalai Lama gave me. So I told her the story, and she said, oh, she was just like slack job, right? Just like, what in the world were you thinking? So I'm just fast forwarding now. So I said, yeah, I've got the book. So I went to I couldn't find the book. I ripped that house apart looking for the book that the Dalai Lama gave to me. I couldn't find it. I was heartbroken. And every time I moved after that, I looked again for this book. I thought it has to be somewhere. When I moved to Oregon, I still looked for that book. It wasn't there. And one day, out of the clear blue sky, I get this package. It's the book. This is like 30 years later. It's the book. And a little note that said, I don't know if you remember me or not, but I was a kid in junior high, and I was writing a little thing about religions. And I asked you what you knew about it. And you said, here, read this book. It's all about Buddhism, and it might be interesting for you. And she said, now I have a child, and we're making a room for the baby. And I found this book, and I thought maybe you'd like to have it back. So I told the whole story. And you're probably wondering, well, what's that got to do with people who think they're better than you? When I realized that the Dalai Lama had asked to stay in my office, I didn't understand it at the time. But for a minute, I thought, I am such a moron. Oh my God. What is wrong with me? What was wrong with me then? But since then, I've gone back to my 5 and said, well, you don't know what you don't know. And I only knew what I knew. And what I took from that was that, well, I certainly was a 5 then. Basic human with whatever knowledge I had in the world. And now, I'd probably play that out differently. But, I'm still just a human, and I only know what I know. And I don't know what I don't know. So, even now I view the Dalai Lama as someone who operates, from my reality, he's about at least an 8 most of the time. He doesn't lose his grip. He doesn't get angry. He doesn't throw stuff. He doesn't, he goes around. He spent his whole life trying to talk about, being at peace and, appreciating the planet and nature and all those things. And that's all wonderful and good. And, that's how he spent his life. But I'll bet if I asked him, he'd say, yeah, I'm probably about a 5. And with that, I'll let you, say, God, what is wrong with that woman? And think about being a 5. Talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Healing Your Family Legacy here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. This channel is made possible because of listeners just like you. If you would like to support the channel with your tax-deductible contribution on an ongoing basis or through a one-time gift, head over to experienceofthesoul.com/support. Healing Your Family Legacy is copyright 2022, Dr. Donna Bevan-Lee, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Dave Croft and used with permission. The Experience of the Soul podcast channel is a production of 818 Studios.
Hey friends, Sean here, your Experience of the Soul producer. I want to take a moment to tell you about something truly exciting. The SoulWorks online community, created by your host, Cynthia Alice Anderson, and available on the Mighty Networks app. If you're looking for a place where you can explore your spiritual path, connect with others, and grow in a meaningful way, then this is for you. SoulWorks is so much more than an online community. It's a safe, inclusive space for spiritual exploration, self-discovery, and personal transformation. Inside the community, you'll find everything from uplifting spiritual studies to soul-centered growth practices, meditations, affirmations, and so much more. It's a space where you'll always be supported and never judged. The best part, membership is free. You'll have access to powerful resources, inspiring content, and a supportive group of like-minded people who are all on their own unique spiritual journeys. And if you're ready to dive deeper, there are premium options available to enhance your experience with a live Monday night talk series and extended, deeper meditations. If you're seeking a place to connect, grow, and nurture your soul, we would love to have you join us in the SoulWorks community and see where this journey can take you. Visit my.soulworkscommunity.com today.